I'm gonna prove to you that God is actually the devil using the Bible, and if I can't, then unsubscribe and roast me in the comments. We're talking verses where God literally says, I create evil, where God kills every firstborn child in Egypt, commands genocide, demands slavery, accepts a literal burnt virgin sacrifice, and sends lying spirits to trick people. If God is supposed to be good, then why the hell does he act exactly like the devil? And that's just the beginning, because it gets so much worse. Today, I'm gonna do something that no church wants you to do. Actually read the Bible. And I don't mean the cherry-picked verses they spoon-feed you on Sunday mornings. I mean the raw, uncut, batshit crazy parts they hope that you never open to. And guess what? I'm not the first person to notice this. Some of the very first Christians read these same verses and said, yeah, this God, totally evil. The Gnostic Christians said he was a fake, a god of darkness just pretending to be the light. And Marcion, the guy who actually created the world's very first Christian Bible, said that he was an evil tyrant. And the Cathars, a medieval group of Christians, said he was literally the devil himself. And yeah, these weren't edgy atheists on Reddit, they were Christians. They read the scriptures and said, nope, that's Satan, and Jesus came from a higher God entirely. And for that, the church burned them alive and erased their books. But here's the thing, we don't even need their banned books to prove it, because it's all right there in the Bible. And today I'm gonna show you the verses your pastor never wanted you to see. But guess what? This isn't just about dusty old scriptures, it's about you right now. Because if you've been lied to about who God is, have you been lied to about who you are? My name is Morg, I'm an ex-Christian, blowing the lid off hidden knowledge to wake the world the hell up. And today we're answering the question, what if the being at the center of the world's biggest religion is actually the world's biggest villain? And I'm gonna prove it to you, verse by verse, from the Bible itself. So keep track, and if you're sharp, and I know you are, you're gonna see the patterns before I even call them out. Ready? Here we go. Let's open with something that should absolutely nuke every Sunday school lesson you've ever heard. Isaiah 45:7 says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. All right, what the God creates evil? That's not Satan talking. That's not a mistranslation from an old manuscript. That's the Bible in black and white. And in case you thought that was just some crazy one-off, Lamentations 3:38 doubles down. Out of the mouth of the Most High proceedeth not evil and good. So the Bible itself admits it. The God people worship is the one creating the disasters, the pain, the chaos. He isn't just allowing evil. He's bragging that he makes it. So tell me, does that sound like God, or does that sound like the villain of the story? Well, that's exactly what the guy who literally created the world's first Bible thought when he saw that verse. Yeah, I'm talking about Marcion. See, the early church writer Tertullian writes, when Marcion found the creator declaring, I am he that creates evil, he presumed that there ought to be another God of good. So Marcion took one look at this verse and said, yeah, that's exhibit A for why I'm cutting the entire Old Testament out of my Bible. There's clearly a higher God than this pretender. And the scary part is, this is just the beginning, because the verses we're about to hit, they make these look like child's play. All right, get ready, because this one's a train wreck. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. I'm sorry, God regrets? Isn't this supposed to be, I don't know, an all-knowing, all-perfect God? But now God is sitting up in heaven going, well, shit, maybe creating humanity was a mistake. My bad.
Ugh, creating humanity was such a mistake. Ugh.
But you're all-knowing?
I know you're an idiot, Gary.
But it doesn't stop there. Samuel 15:11 says, I regret that I have made Saul king because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. All right, hold the goddamn phone. God is clearly admitting that he f***s up on the regular, and that's pretty damning evidence that this might not be the all-knowing, all-perfect God of everything, don't you think? But if you thought that was bad, now this one is just embarrassing. In the Garden of Eden, after eating from the forbidden fruit, God literally can't find Adam. But the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, where are you? You're telling me this all-knowing God can't even win a game of fucking hide and seek? Imagine the almighty creator of the universe wandering around the garden like, hey, Adam, where'd you go, buddy?
Adam? Ugh, I should have installed Find My iPhone on this guy.
You are supposed to be all-knowing, bro.
What is this, divine Marco Polo? If you're omniscient, you don't need to ask questions. If you're the Alpha and the Omega, you don't lose track of your own dude behind a bush. And if you're already thinking, this doesn't sound like God, you're already way ahead of most. See, the Gnostics saw these scriptures where God literally admits he makes mistakes and loses people like your grandma loses her car keys. And they said, are you kidding me? There's no way this guy can be God. In fact, one of their books called The Testimony of Truth calls him out on this exact point. It says, God said, Adam, where are you? God does not have foreknowledge? Would he have not known from the beginning? What kind of God is this? In other words, they're saying this God can't even keep track of one guy? Who is this loser? And yet people still bow down and call him perfect. Newsflash, if your God can't keep track of a naked guy in a garden, maybe he's not the Almighty. But here's what's even crazier. They didn't stop there. They said that there was a higher God, one that wasn't jealous or violent, a real God. And Jesus, they said that he came from that God. More on that later, and it changes everything. Okay, so we have this God that can't win a game of hide and seek and literally admits that he makes mistakes. And so what does he do about it? Well, he decides to kill literally everyone, of course, except one guy and his family. Yeah, I'm talking about the flood. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. Remember, this includes totally innocent children and babies. Tell me again why you're worshiping a God who keeps saying, oops, my bad, before murdering everyone on the planet. Yet we teach the story of Noah's Ark to kids as if genocide is some cute little bedtime story. Wake up, people. How up is that? You wonder why we have the problems in the world we have today? The Gnostics looked at this and called it out for what it is, totally evil. In fact, according to a Gnostic text called the Apocalypse of Adam, God decided to kill everyone because people were getting too smart and refusing to worship him. And so why did he save Noah? Because there was a catch. Literal slavery. In the Apocalypse of Adam, Noah straight up tells his sons to serve God in fear and slavery all the days of your life. And don't get me started on just how insane and absurd this story is. I was literally taught that dinosaurs were on the ark. Seriously. But that aside, think about this. 2 of every animal, right? Well, guess what? That includes herbivores and carnivores. So after the waters recede, what exactly did the lions eat? Did the cheetahs just go vegan for a few years? Did Noah pack them all a few years' lunch? Yeah, right. Think about it. If there are only 2 gazelles on the ark and 2 lions, the moment they disembark, the lions would wipe out the gazelles. If carnivores ate even one herbivore pair, that species would go extinct instantly. The whole post-flood food chain would have been one big extinction speedrun.
What happened to the unicorns?
The lions had to eat something.
Now, if you want me to do a full video tearing through every absurdity in the Bible, let me know in the comments. But don't miss the bigger point here, which is the God behind the flood is a genocidal monster. And if the Bible itself paints him this way, maybe that's because the God of the Bible is actually the devil. That's why many ancient Christians said, nope, this isn't the real God. There has to be something higher. We're gonna get to that, but hold up, because this next section isn't just about absurdity. It's one of the sickest divine setups in all of Scripture. All right, this one is pure nightmare fuel. So in the book of Exodus, the Israelites are slaves in Egypt, and their leader, Moses, keeps going to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, saying, let my people go. But here's the up twist. The Bible says it wasn't just Pharaoh being stubborn on his own. Over and over again, the text literally says that God is the one messing with him. Exodus 9:12, and the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Exodus 10:20, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. Exodus 11:10, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. Again and again, are you seeing the pattern? God keeps making him stubborn so that Pharaoh won't let Israel go. Why? Who the knows? Apparently, it's so God can unleash more plagues, more suffering, and more death. And then comes the grand finale. At midnight, the Lord killed the firstborn son of every Egyptian family, from the son of the king to the son of every prisoner in jail. He also killed the firstborn male of every animal that belonged to the Egyptians. Seriously, let that sink in. God kills every firstborn child in Egypt. Totally innocent children, even the animals. He literally makes Pharaoh stubborn, then punishes the people for Pharaoh's stubbornness that he caused. This is worse than Emperor Palpatine triggering Order 66.
Execute Order 66.
If your God has to rig the game so he can get his kicks killing babies, then congratulations, your God is not holy. He's a sadist. And if this makes your stomach turn good, that means you have a conscience, which is more than I can say for the God in this story. Okay, but this one is where the mask completely rips off. 1 Samuel 15:3 says, "Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys." Wake the up, people. How can anyone look at this and conclude that this is a loving God of any kind? This is pure evil. But it doesn't stop there. Deuteronomy 20:16-17 says, "Do not leave alive anything that breathes. Completely destroy them. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded. Nothing that breathes. Wipe them out. All of them." And it gets darker. In Numbers 31, after slaughtering the Midianites, Moses tells the men, "Now kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man. But all the young girls who have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves." What the Kill the boys, kill the mothers, but keep the virgin girls for yourself? If you read that and thought, this is literally the stuff we were warned the devil would do, you're right and you're paying attention. That's not holy, that's a war crime. But if you're still trying to justify this in your head, maybe you need to look in the mirror and realize that you've been brainwashed. Think about this. If any leader on earth today said, kill the men and the women and the babies, but keep the virgins for yourself, we'd call them one of the worst fascists in history. But when it's in the Bible, we slap a gold cross on it and call it holy.
Was actually a tremendous blessing to these children to be killed and go to heaven and be with God.
Can you believe this shit? This is the God you're told to pray to? This is the God entire civilizations are built on. A God whose commandments sound like a psychopath's war diary. So I'll ask again, does this sound like God or does it sound like the devil? Be honest. But now let's talk about something that absolutely blows the lid off the whole God is love scam. Slavery. Leviticus says, "You may acquire male and female slaves from the nations around you. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you to inherit as a permanent possession." Can you believe this shit? Buy foreigners and treat them as literal property and then hand them down to your kids like a family heirloom. That's a divine stamp of approval on human trafficking. But wait, it gets darker. Exodus says, "If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies immediately, he must be punished. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be punished, for the slave is his property." Okay, what the You can beat a human being with a stick, and as long as they don't drop dead right away, it's cool? Because, say it with me, the slave is his property. And a lot of Christians try to wriggle out of this with, "Oh, well, that's just the Old Testament. We don't go by that anymore." Oh, really? Because slavery's in the New Testament too, as totally God approved. Check it out. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling. And guess what? If the masters are cruel, too bad. Slaves, submit to your masters, not only to the good and the gentle, but also to the cruel. And if you think it can't get worse, think again. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. Work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Yeah, serve your masters as if you were serving God himself. And that's all in the New Testament. And here's the part that should make you really pissed. This wasn't just theory. Some Christians actually use these exact verses to literally justify slavery for centuries.
And God says slavery is totally fine.
I think our teacher works for the devil.
There was even a version of the Bible printed in the 1800s called the Slave Bible, and they used it to control slaves. But get this, they cut out the parts about freedom and kept in all the verses about obeying your masters, because that's the real function of this book. Control. Obey your masters, serve authority, never question the system. So yeah, don't give me that God is love bullshit. The Gnostic Christians, they saw right through this. They said that the God of this world actually created human bodies as prisons to trap divine light to be his slaves. In one of their texts on the origin of the world, God says, we shall make those who are born from the light our servants through all the time of this age. And in their book, The Apocalypse of Adam, Adam says, God divided us in wrath and we served him in fear and slavery. Okay, but if you thought that was bad, here's one that should make you spit out your communion wine. Exodus 34:14 says, for thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Excuse me, what? Jealous is his name? That's literally how he introduces himself. Imagine if I walked up to you and said, hi, I'm jealous, nice to meet you. You'd back the away and call me a psycho. But that's the Almighty, the creator of the universe. If you're truly the one and only God, why the hell are you jealous? Who are you competing with? Who are you afraid of? Jealousy only makes sense if there are rivals. And that's exactly what the Gnostics said, that jealousy proves that this isn't the ultimate infinite source of reality. One Gnostic text called The Secret Book of John says, I am a jealous God and there is no God but me. But by doing this, he admitted to his demons that there is indeed another God. For if there were no other God, whom would he possibly be jealous of? Yeah, and they said his angels were actually demons too. If your God has jealousy issues, maybe he's not the supreme being. Okay, but this one will make your head explode. Exodus 25 says, I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. Yeah, God says, I'm gonna punish your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids for what you did. What the hell? Imagine if a cop arrests you because your great-great-grandpa stole a donkey.
Hi, my name is Jealous, and I punish kids for their parents' sins.
Hi, Jealous.
What the actual kind of justice is that? But wait, it gets better. Flip a few hundred pages forward, and suddenly God pulls a 180. Ezekiel 18:20 says, the son will not bear the punishment for the sin of the father, nor will the father bear the punishment for the sin of the son. So which is it? Are you getting whiplash yet? So do kids get punished for their parents' sins, or don't they? You can't have it both ways. Huh, it's almost like the Bible was written by a bunch of guys across time who couldn't make up their damn minds rather than a perfect God, doesn't it? Oh no, but that's a radical, crazy idea. The Bible flat out contradicts itself on one of the most basic moral questions imaginable. Should children suffer for the crimes of their parents? And the Gnostics called this out too. Their book, The Testimony of Truth, said, and he said, I am the jealous God. I will bring the sins of the fathers upon the children until 3 and 4 generations. But these things he has said to those who believe in him and serve him. The Gnostic Christians are saying, not only is this crazy, but this isn't even aimed at people who rejected him. No, the verse says this is to those who believe in him and serve him. And if you think this is bad, buckle up, because the next verses show God is literally sending evil spirits to deceive people. Yeah, God playing the role of the devil himself. Check this out. This is the Bible flat out saying that God is the deceiver. 1 Samuel 16:14 says, now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. An evil spirit from the Lord. God didn't protect Saul from demons. He sent the demon. And get ready for this shit, because here's where it comes full circle. Remember how God ordered the Amalekites totally wiped out men, women, children, animals, the whole genocide checklist? And remember how God said later he regretted making Saul king? Yeah, apparently the all-knowing makes oopsies.
I regret creating humans.
Should I mark this as your first oopsie or your millionth?
Shut up, Steve, or I'll regret you too.
But why did God regret Saul? Because Saul killed almost everyone, but he spared the Amalekite king and kept some of the animals alive. Not to pet them, not to start a farm, but to literally sacrifice them to God. And what does God do? He flips the hell out. He says, nope, you failed the genocide test. That's why the Bible says that God regretted making Saul king. That's why God sent the demon. He tormented Saul, drove him insane, and destroyed his life because Saul spared one guy and a few animals. The almighty creator of the universe got pissed off because his genocide wasn't thorough enough. But wait, it gets crazier. In 1 Kings, the prophet Micaiah has a vision of God's throne room, and God is literally brainstorming how to trick a king into marching to his death. And then one spirit pipes up and says, I will go forth and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And God said, you shall persuade him and you shall prevail. go forth and do so. God literally hires a demon to run propaganda for him. That's some CIA Black Ops psychological warfare shit.
So my resume includes gaslighting prophets and inventing catfishing.
Perfect. You're hired.
And if that's not bad enough, the New Testament doubles down. 2 Thessalonians says, "For this reason God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie." Isn't Satan supposed to be the father of lies? But it's not Satan sending the delusion, God does. So let's ask the obvious question. If God is the one sending the evil spirits, deceiving spirits, and strong delusions, then what the hell is the devil even for? Isn't that his job description? If your God brags about sending evil spirits and lying to humanity, then congratulations, you've been worshiping the very deceiver that you were warned about. And if that doesn't make you say, what the actual hell's going on, then nothing will. And I want you to remember that this is more than a channel. What you're watching is a revolution of consciousness, and you are a part of it now. So hit like and subscribe to spread this like fire. And if you want to help out even more, become a member for a ton of free downloads on inner transformation and exclusive videos like this week's video called The One Sin Jesus Says You'll Never Be Forgiven For. And also check out my books. Links are in the description of this video. Okay, so the Bible itself is saying that God is the deceiver, the one sending the lying spirits and delusions. Well, guess what? The Cathars believed that the devil himself pulled off the ultimate deception by tricking humanity into believing he was God. A Cathar text called The Secret Supper says, "The devil said to them, 'See you that I am God, and there is no other God beside me.'" Yeah, the Cathars believed that the devil even used the Bible itself as a tool to trick humanity by infecting the scriptures. Their text says, Enoch wrote 76 books. These the devil bade him to take to earth. Enoch took the books and turned them over to his sons, and he taught them sacrificial rites. This they did in such wise as to shut the kingdom of heaven against men. Yeah, according to them, the devil with scripture and filled it with bloody sacrifice to keep people from finding heaven. And speaking of sacrifices, let's talk about that for a minute. What's the one thing that usually comes to mind when you think of satanic sacrifice? What do they always show in Hollywood movies? A burnt virgin sacrifice, right? I mean, come on, if God accepted a burnt virgin sacrifice, wouldn't that be proof positive that he's the devil? All right, well, get ready. We're talking about Judges 11, the story of Jephthah. Before going into battle, Jephthah makes a bargain with God. If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. And guess what? God gives him the victory. Cool, right? Until Jephthah gets home, and the first one to walk out the door to greet him isn't a goat or a sheep or a servant, it's his daughter, his only child. The text says, when he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh no, my daughter, you have brought me down and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." Then the hammer drops. After giving her 2 months to mourn, the passage ends with, "He did to her as he had vowed, and she was a virgin." That's right. Jephthah's daughter is sacrificed, a virgin girl, as a burnt offering to God. What the f? And here's the part that should make you furious. Not once does God step in and say, "Hey, no, don't do this. Human sacrifice is wrong. I don't want this." No. God accepts the deal. He cashes the blood payment, burning a virgin alive to satisfy a god. That's literally the shit people accuse the devil of doing. Demanding blood sacrifices, demanding innocent flesh. But in the Bible, the only one demanding it is God. So let me ask you this. If your God accepts child sacrifice, if your God accepts the blood of virgins, then who the hell are you worshiping? All right, so let's talk about one of God's strangest obsessions in the Bible, blood. From the very beginning, God is practically addicted to it. He doesn't want your vegetables. He doesn't want your fruit basket. He wants slaughter, blood on the ground, and the smell of burning flesh.
Ah! I said blood, not broccoli.
Should we bring another goat?
Think about it. He accepts Abel's offering of a slaughtered animal, but totally rejects Cain's offering of vegetables. Genesis 4 lays it all out. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. So God looks at Abel's bloody animal sacrifice and says, now that's my kind of worship. But Cain brings over some vegetables and God's like, nah, not good enough. Apparently, the Almighty doesn't think kale is holy, but it only escalates because if you flip through Leviticus, it reads like a butcher's manual. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar. The priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. A pleasing aroma. Let that sink in. God is literally sniffing barbecue smoke and calling it a holy snack. If Satan was running a church, you'd expect him to say, bring me your blood, burn it, offer it, I'll breathe it in like incense. But the one demanding it in the Bible isn't Satan, it's God. So think about it. The God who supposedly created galaxies and stars is sitting around in heaven saying, you know what I want? The smell of burning cow. Seriously? Does that really sound like a god? Or like a bunch of ancient dudes in the desert writing a book to make their backyard barbecue sound holy? If NASA held a press conference tomorrow and said, we've discovered the creator of the universe, and what he really wants is for us to grill goats for him, we'd laugh them off the stage. But when it's in the Bible, we just nod and say amen.
The creator of the universe says his true desire is barbecue goat.
So ask yourself, if your God is addicted to blood, demands death, and calls it a pleasing aroma, then who the hell are you actually worshiping? The early Christians saw this too, and they asked, what kind of God needs this much blood? That's when they started looking for another one, and we're gonna get to that. But if you thought the Bible was at least consistent about who the bad guy is, think again. Check this out. 2 Samuel says, again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go number Israel and Judah. Okay, so according to this, it's God himself telling David to take a census of the people. God's like, hey, David, go count everyone, and David does it. But then, surprise, God gets pissed at David for doing the very thing he just told him to do, and he punishes Israel for it. Classic toxic relationship move, bro. But here's the plot twist. If you flip to 1 Chronicles, it says, then Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to number Israel. Okay, hold on. In one book, God does it. In another book, Satan does it. It's the same event, but different culprit? Which one is it? Let me spell this out. The Bible can't even decide whether it was God or Satan pulling the strings here. It literally swaps them like they're interchangeable. Now, some people will try to say, well, maybe God ordered Satan to do it. But honestly, isn't that just as bad? Either way, you've got God telling David to do something, then punishing him for doing it. Or, in the other case, you have God and Satan working hand in hand to set David up for failure. And this is where you gotta ask yourself if God and Satan can be literally swapped out in the same story like they're the same being, or at least on the same team, then maybe they're not as different as you were taught. Maybe they're just two faces of the same damn coin. In fact, according to Judaism, Satan isn't even God's enemy. He works for God as one of his employees. And think about the practical takeaway here. If your holy book can't tell you whether it was God or the devil who ordered something, then what the are you even worshiping? And if that doesn't shake you awake, I don't know what will. But if you thought that was bad, get ready for some of the Bible's most psychotic punishments. These are the stories that prove God doesn't just act like a dictator, he acts like a deranged psychopath. And if you thought owning people was peak evil, wait till you see what this God does when you touch his furniture. First up, Uzzah. In 2 Samuel, it says, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down and he died there beside the ark of God. Okay, so if you don't know what the Ark of the Covenant is, picture this, a big gold box with angel statues on top. And according to the Bible, that's where the literal Spirit of God would hang out. Yeah. The Almighty, creator of galaxies and black holes, supposedly chose to chill inside a fancy chest. God in a box. What the actual But this thing comes with some terms and conditions. Specifically, touch it and die. Should we really be surprised at this point? Well, to avoid touching the thing, they used poles to carry it around. I don't know, man. The Bible's weird. Anyway, the ark is wobbling, about to fall into the dirt, and Uzzah does the natural thing. He steadies it so it won't crash. What does God do? Zaps him dead on the spot. Imagine helping someone move their couch and they kill you because you touched it wrong. But we're just getting started. Check out 2 Kings, where Elisha is walking around and some kids make fun of him for being bald. And so what happens? Elisha calls down a curse in the name of the Lord, and suddenly 2 bears come out of the woods and maul 42 children. 42! Talk about not being able to handle a joke. Now let's check out Numbers 15:35, where some guy is caught gathering sticks on the Sabbath, the day of rest. You know, probably just trying to cook dinner or keep his family warm. So what does God do? Then the Lord said to Moses, the man must die. The whole assembly must stone him outside the camp. So the assembly took him outside the camp and stoned him to death, as the Lord commanded. Can you imagine? They execute a man for picking up sticks? Imagine living under a boss who literally enforces death because you didn't rest the right way on your day off.
Drop the wood!
Go! It's literally just firewood.
Tell it to the rocks, sinner.
And if that wasn't horrifying enough, flip to Psalms 137, verse 9. The Psalms writer is crying for revenge against Israel's enemies and says, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Just stop and let that sink in. Try to come up with something more horrible than that. Seriously, isn't this the epitome of evil? Now, God didn't say this directly, it was the Psalms writer, but remember, this is supposed to be the perfect word of God. I was taught the Bible is so perfect, God could be considered the author of every book, that he just used humans like some kind of cosmic pencil. And here the Bible says, you're blessed, happy if you smash babies against stones. And this is not hiding in some fringe book or a satanic cult manual. It's in the Bible. The book people call holy, the book people read to their kids at bedtime. If Satan himself wrote a verse, how the hell could he top that? You're starting to see why the Cathars believe the devil wrote most of the Bible, but it's about to get way worse. Remember that story I told you in 2 Samuel, where it says God provoked David to take a census, but then in Chronicles it says that Satan did it? Same event, 2 different culprits? The Bible literally swaps God and Satan like they're the same damn thing. So let me ask the obvious question. Who the hell is God anyway? Because if the Bible can't decide whether God or Satan is pulling the strings, maybe it's because they're one and the same, and here's where the New Testament blows the whistle on it. In John 12, Jesus says, now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the ruler of this world be cast out. Wait, what? The ruler of this world? Isn't that supposed to be God? What's Jesus talking about? Was he turning water into wine and tossing them back between sermons? Remember, the Gnostics, Cathars, and Marcions were all Christians that believed that the ruler of this world is evil and that Jesus came from a completely different God, a higher God of light that ruled the spiritual world. So they would all say that Jesus is calling out the fake God who's the ruler of this world. 2 Corinthians says, the God of this world, Satan, has blinded the minds of the unbelieving to prevent them from seeing the illuminating light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Who's the God of this world? Not the Father of Christ. Paul says it flat out. It's a false god blinding the world. And don't forget, in Luke, the devil takes Jesus up to a high place and shows him all the kingdoms of the world. The devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, I will give you all their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want. If you worship me, it will all be yours. Now hold on. The devil says all the kingdoms of the world are his, and Jesus doesn't argue. He doesn't say, that's a lie, Satan. God runs the world. No, he just rejects the offer, which means even Jesus is admitting it. Yeah, the devil really does rule the world. The Cathars, who said that the God of the material world was actually Satan, had a special name for him. Do you know what they called him? Rex Mundi, which literally means king of the world. So let's connect the dots here. The Old Testament shows God acting like Satan, and then the New Testament straight up admits it. The ruler of this world, the God of this world, the one running the kingdoms of earth is Satan. And yet billions of people bow their heads every Sunday and pray to the God of this world. Do you see how insane this is? But let's drop the hammer with the words of Jesus himself. In John, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, who are the religious leaders of the day. These guys are the #1 Yahweh fan club, the hardcore worshipers of the Old Testament God. And Jesus says to them, you are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Let that sink in. Jesus didn't say, oh, you Pharisees are a little misguided. No, he said your daddy is the devil. So if the Pharisees, the ultimate Yahweh worshipers, are children of the devil, then Jesus is basically saying, Yahweh isn't my father. Yahweh's the father of lies. Now, do you see why the Gnostics went nuclear with this? They said, exactly. Jesus came from another God entirely, a higher God beyond the ruler of this world. In their books, Jesus is not the obedient son of Yahweh. He's the messenger of the true light and is exposing Yahweh as an imposter. In the Gnostic book, The Gospel of Judas, Jesus lays it all out crystal clear. So early in the gospel, the disciples are doing some heartfelt prayer, trying to look holy, and Jesus laughs in their face. And the disciples are like, Jesus, what the f-? And Jesus goes, I'm not laughing at you. You're not doing this because you want to, but because through this, your God will be praised. Yeah, the disciples think they're worshiping the God of Jesus, and Jesus is like, nah, not even close. Naturally, the disciples freak out and say, Master, you're the son of our God. And Jesus goes full savage mode by saying, how do you know me? Truly, I say to you, no generation of the people among you will know me. Yeah, basically, you guys don't even know who you're worshiping or who I am. Later, the disciples describe a vision they have of a temple with priests and sacrifices and a crowd. And Jesus interprets the vision for them, and it's savage. He tells them, you are the ones receiving the offerings on the altar you've seen. That's the God you serve. And the animals you saw brought in to be sacrificed are the crowd you lead astray before that altar. Your minister will stand up and use my name like that, and the generations of the pious will be loyal to him. So Jesus, according to the Gnostic Gospel of Judas, said that Christianity would be hijacked in his name to get people to serve the wrong God. Sound familiar? And once you see it, the conclusion is inescapable. Jesus wasn't pointing us back to Yahweh, he was pointing us away from him. So here's the question you gotta ask. If Jesus wasn't the son of Yahweh, then who was he the son of? The Gnostics would say the true realm of pure light. And if that wasn't all clear enough, check this out. 1 Peter 5 says, your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Okay, clear enough. The devil is a lion, stalking, ready to rip you apart. Classic devil, am I right? But flip back to Hosea 5 and it says, for I will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a young lion to the house of Judah. I, even I, will tear them to pieces and go away. I will carry them off and with no one to rescue them. Well, there's the devil again, bragging about how evil he is. Wait. Hold on. That's not the devil. That's God talking. Yahweh literally says, I will be like a lion tearing them to pieces. So the devil is a lion devouring people, and God is a lion tearing people apart. Same imagery, same predatory violence, just different name tags.
I will tear you to pieces.
Wait, I thought that was Satan's thing.
Shut up. I was lion first.
And guess how the Gnostics described what the false god of this world looked like? Check this out from their book, The Secret Book of John. It says that he had the form of a dragon with a lion's head and eyes flashing lightning bolts. So let me ask you, if in the Bible, God and the devil are both lions devouring, then who the hell are we supposed to trust? And just to make it even more confusing, in the book of Revelation, it throws this in. Behold the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David has triumphed. So in Revelation, They're talking about Jesus. So think about this. Satan's a lion, Yahweh calls himself a lion, and now Jesus is a lion too? How many damn lions are we supposed to keep track of here? But here's the thing. Revelation is a book that's not like the Gospels. It was written later, and it's violent as hell, soaked in blood and war imagery. And Marcion? He straight up rejected it because he knew that it was a departure from what Jesus actually taught. And the Cathars went even further. They said the Bible itself was tainted by the devil, not just the Old Testament, but even parts of the New Testament, including verses about Jesus. They said that they were corrupted. So when Revelation starts turning Jesus into another roaring predator drenched in blood, many of the so-called heretics didn't see that as divine truth. They saw it as more propaganda from the false god, sneaking his stamp of violence even onto Christ to twist the message. Now, if you thought the other verses were bad, this one is the final nail in the coffin because it's where God and Satan don't just blur together. They sit down in the same heavenly courtroom and basically collab on torturing a human being for the hell of it. In Job, the Bible says, Satan came along among them, the angels, to present himself before the Lord. Wait, hold on. Satan's just casually hanging out in heaven with God and the other angels? That alone should make you say, what the f? Now, this totally fits in with mainstream Judaism, which says that Satan is God's employee. But it's weird as hell for Christianity, which presents Satan as the arch nemesis to God. But here he's in the heavenly boardroom with God, having a little chat, but the conversation is even worse. God is bragging about his servant Job and his faithfulness, and Satan says, well, sure, he only worships you because his life is good. And God's like, bet, go ahead, ruin his life, just don't kill him. So what happens? Job loses everything, his wealth, his family, his kids are slaughtered, his body is covered in boils, and he sits in ashes, scraping himself with broken pottery, wishing that he was dead. And then in Job chapter 2, God literally admits he let Job be tortured for no reason. You incited me against him to destroy him without reason. How up is that? Okay, now wait a minute. This whole time we've been saying that God is Satan, but here in Job, they're sitting in the same room together having a conversation. Well, doesn't that mean they're different then? Well, think about this. Who was responsible for Job's torture? Well, both of them. The so-called creator and the so-called adversary were working together hand in hand. So what if they're two sides of the same coin? So to really understand what's going on, we gotta talk about Carl Jung. Yeah, that Carl Jung, who's one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. He's the guy who literally coined the words introvert and extrovert, and he came up with the whole idea of the shadow self and shadow work. All right, so why the hell are we talking about him in a video about God and the devil? Because Jung was obsessed with the Gnostics, and he dug through their banned writings, their visions, their myths, and he said what they saw actually lines up with the human psyche. See, Jung had the balls to say out loud what religion tries to hide. Satan is actually God's shadow side. See all the cruelty, rage, and deception and sadism that God doesn't want to admit? Well, that gets shoved into the devil. It's not some cosmic war between equals, it's God's own darkness projected out as the adversary. And suddenly, the book of Job makes a lot more sense. God and Satan aren't enemies, they're two sides of one coin, the bright face and the shadow. And when God lets Satan torture Job, Jung says that's not just a test of Job, it's actually a test of God. It's God wrestling with his own darkness. So think about that. If Jung is right, then the devil isn't some fallen angel at war with God, he's God's own shadow. The part religion tries to hide, the part that slips out in genocide, slavery, lies, floods, and pointless suffering. And doesn't everything suddenly make a hell of a lot more sense in that context? Remember what God says in Isaiah, I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create evil, I the Lord do all these things? And Lamentations, where it says, is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both evil and good things come out? For centuries, people have scratched their heads like, wait, how could a good God admit to creating evil? But through the lens of Carl Jung, it clicks. God is light, but he's also shadow. The devil isn't his opposite, he's his dark half, the disowned side. The darkness God projects out so he doesn't have to own it. So when you read the Bible saying God creates good and evil, that he loves and kills, builds and destroys, that's the shadow bleeding through. Jung said that the devil is nothing less than God's own shadow that's been repressed. It's the darkness of divinity itself, the part of God nobody wants to talk about, the part that Christianity shoves under the rug. But here's the kicker, because Jung said that Jesus was actually God's attempt to grow, to evolve, to actually learn compassion by experiencing human suffering himself. He's God's way of saying, I need a change, I need to learn some empathy. Which means the God of the Old Testament wasn't the final word, he was the problem, and Jesus was the attempt at a solution. But hold up, because Jung's not done, because even after Jesus, the story isn't complete. Why? Because through Jesus, God only integrated his light side. He became love and mercy and grace, but he still exiled his dark side and cast it out. He made it the devil. And Jung says that was the biggest psychological mistake of all. You can't have wholeness without acknowledging both light and dark. But Christianity repressed one half. It made God all light and threw the darkness into the trash. But as a psychologist, Jung knew that denying the darkness or repressing your shadow self doesn't erase it. It only makes it stronger and breaks out in even uglier ways. See, Jung argued that the Trinity was incomplete, that it needed a fourth side to be whole, to make it a quaternity, and that missing piece was the dark side of God. Jung wrote, the basic thesis of the book is that as well as having a good side, God also has a fourth side, the evil face of God. But remember, this is all from a psychological perspective. So what this means is that unless the shadow is acknowledged and brought into the divine totality, God's story and humanity's remains unresolved. Carl Jung wrote, if the God is absolute beauty and goodness, how should he encompass the fullness of life, which is beautiful and hateful, good and evil, laughable and serious, human and inhuman? In other words, Jung said if God is everything, then he must be darkness too. Okay, so with that in mind, let's ask the question that's been building this whole time. Is God literally the devil? Like, are we talking horns and a pitchfork, wearing a red suit, roasting souls in hell? Well, no, that's cartoon bullshit. These are stories, and they didn't literally happen the way they're written. There was no cosmic courtroom where God and Satan played poker over Job's life. No Noah's Ark with 2 giraffes and a boat the size of a Costco. And no bears mauling kids because they teased a bald prophet. These are myths, but here's the thing, that does not make them meaningless. Stories are how humans understand reality. Stories are how our brains get programmed. And when a story is repeated over and over, it shapes not just one person, but entire civilizations. So according to Jung, this isn't just about God, it's about the psychology of every single one of us. Jung wrote, how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. So it's symbolic. The God and devil he's talking about, they're inside you, inside all of us. You want to ascend, to become whole? Well, then you better dig deep into your shadow, because if you don't, Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you don't integrate it, the shadow can control you and cause havoc on your life, just like God falling for Satan's bet and basically torturing Job. In other words, if you ignore the devil inside, he's still pulling the strings. You pretend you're only light, only good, and only holy, love and light, and that's it. That's when the darkness owns you. If you want to be whole, then you have to face your devil. And once you look it in the eye and stop pretending it's not there, you start to become your whole self. So when the Bible tells you about a jealous God who floods the earth, orders genocides, demands blood sacrifices, and sends lying spirits, that's not historical fact, but it absolutely reveals something very real. It reveals the darkness in our own psychology, that voice in the human mind that wants control and feeds on fear, that manipulates and enslaves. You could call it Satan, you could even call it Sauron or Darth Vader, because it's the same archetype, the same shadow. These characters just stand in and represent that very real energy. And here's the crazy part though, people take these stories literally and see them as objective truth. Imagine if millions of people actually started killing each other over whether Obi-Wan Kenobi or Gandalf was the real chosen one. Sounds insane, right? But that's exactly what happened happens all over the world today. And this is why it matters, because stories don't just sit in books. They program your damn mind. You teach people violent authoritarian stories, you get violent authoritarian societies. You worship a jealous tyrant god, you build jealous tyrant governments. You kneel before a slave master deity, you create systems of slavery and oppression in his image. But on the flip side, liberating stories create liberated minds. Stories of truth, light, and awakening inspire people to seek freedom and rise above the fear to shatter illusions. Because whether you call it Yahweh, Satan, Rex Mundi, the Demiurge, or the Shadow Self, the effect is the same. If you worship the shadow rules your world. But the Cathars, the Gnostics, and Marcion, they didn't just stop at saying Yahweh was a tyrant and the devil in disguise. They said there was a higher God, the true God, the God of light, of mind, of pure being. Not some insecure bully demanding blood sacrifices and obedience, but the actual source of all reality. In the Secret Book of John, the Gnostics write that it is not right to think of it as God or as like God. It is more than just God. Nothing is above it. Nothing rules it. The Gnostics said, that's where you come from. Not this broken world, not this prison of flesh, but from the realm of light itself. And you don't just come from that source, you are that source. You are literally a spark of the true God, and that's burning inside you. They called it the divine spark. And Marcion said Jesus came to reveal that the higher Father, not Yahweh the tyrant, but the unknowable God, was one of infinite light. And the Cathars took it even further. They said salvation is about rejecting the false God and rejecting the prison of this world and returning to the source of light that we were born from. And here's where Carl Jung connects all the dots together. Jung looked at this and said, that higher God the Gnostics were talking about, psychologically, that's your higher self. It's the archetype of wholeness, the center and totality of your psyche that's beyond the ego, the fear, and all the bullshit you've been programmed with. For Jung, finding God wasn't about kneeling to some external tyrant. It was about waking up to the God inside you, that higher self, that inner light. So is God the devil? Look at the verses, look at the receipts. He creates evil, he kills kids, he demands genocide, slavery, blood. You'd have to be brainwashed not to see that God has a dark side. And you know what's just as crazy? Pretending we don't have a dark side too. Every one of us has an inner devil, a shadow, and ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It just makes it run your life from the shadows, from the background. But if you can see this clearly, then you're not brainwashed. You're here, you're seeing it, and you're not a follower. You're a spark waking the hell up. And remember, facing your shadow doesn't mean worshiping your darkness or letting it control you. It means confronting it and dragging it into the light and figuring out how to deal with it. Integration means this: stop lying to yourself, face it, own it, and work with it. That's how you get free. The Gnostics said that you're a spark of the higher God of light. Jung said that spark is your higher self, but you can't get there until you drag your devil into the light and look it in the face. So here's the real takeaway. Admit it. Admit there's dark shit in the Bible, and admit there's dark shit in you. And once you stop lying to yourself, once you face it, that's when you can start dealing with it. That's when you can finally begin to heal yourself and heal a world that's being torn apart by religion and by our own up psychology. Because the truth isn't about pretending we're pure light. The truth is about owning your shadow and choosing something better. So wake the hell up. But there's so much more to this story. I have videos on every banned Gnostic text I mentioned, and not only did the Cathars believe that God was Satan, but they believed that we are all actually fallen angels that have had our memories wiped. Watch my video all about their book that was hidden by the Inquisition called The Secret Supper.